Okay, welcome back, the participants. I just have to say that was just fantastic keynote. We were so fortunate that Rosanne was able to join us. I've seen her before, I've read her work, listened to her music, but it's just so fantastic to be able to hear her directly speaking on just a range of issues. We're very fortunate she could join us. And really just heartfelt thanks to my colleague, Sonia A. Stars, who brought Rosanne in with us, has that connection with her to be able to get her to join us. So thanks again for all of that. Okay, now we move into our last panel of the day, and I'm going to turn it over to Professor Loren Mulraine, who's a good friend of ours, has been doing music law for many, many years, and he is Director of Music and Entertainment Law Studies at Belmont University College of Law in Nashville. He's also of counsel at Bone, McAllister, and Norton. And I'm going to turn it over to Loren to get the panel going. Thanks, Loren.
Thank you, Sean. I'm excited about being a part of this panel and just this entire conference. You know, the title is an interesting one, the evolving ecosystem of the music business. And an ecosystem is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. When you think about what we are as part of this music ecosystem, it lets us know that we're all interdependent on the success of all the other areas in order for us to all succeed. So I'm very excited about this particular panel, which is called The New Role of Record Labels and Platforms. And we've got 4 great panelists that are going to share their perspectives on that new role. And they are Mitch Glazier, who is the chairman and CEO of the RIAA. We also have Mark Baker, who is the VP of Public Policy and Government Affairs for Warner Music Group. Garrett Levin, who's the president and CEO of Digital Association. And Professor Larry Miller, who is with the NYU Steinhardt School, and his role there is as a professor as well as the director of the music business program. So each of the panelists are going to speak a little bit on their area, and then we'll bring them back in together and talk about some various questions. And at the end of our session today, we'll have some questions from the audience. So we hope that you guys have some great questions, and make sure you share them with us in the chat feature, and we'll make sure that our panelists get a chance to respond to those. So I'd like to start off with Mitch. Mitch, if you don't mind.
Hey, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Loren. And thank you to Sean and CPIP and your whole team for putting this together. This is a very necessary conference, especially as we move forward into this new, even more interdependent age, to sort of take a step back and analyze what's happening in the music industry, and to do so from a standpoint of protecting creative works, which is incredibly important, and I think probably not done enough. And thank you, Loren, for the great work that Belmont Law does and how it contributes to academically to a lot of areas that we need to study further. I thought what I would do today is sort of talk about the evolution based on my experience starting at RIAA at the end of 1999, when I left Capitol Hill, and I thought, wow, won't it be great to work on music, because we don't have to work on all of these hot button issues anymore that I had been working on in addition to intellectual property, like, you know, gun control and impeachment and abortion and, you know, a lot of things that the Judiciary Committee did. And I thought, well, music's got to be easier than that. And then Napster hit every single college campus in the country, and we've been doing emergency room medicine ever since, which has been exciting and an incredible experience. And I think that starting out by talking about this as an ecosystem is exactly right. And if we've learned anything during 2020 in the year of COVID, it's been a reminder of how interdependent we are, and how, you know, the recorded music side, the music publishing side, the live side, you know, all of it has to be healthy. Whether you're a digital platform, a DIY artist, a record company, or a venue or a promoter, everybody has to be able to function in a healthy way. And this year, I think more than any year before, we've seen the community and all those different sections come together to fight to make sure that everybody could be healthy in that ecosystem. So that's sort of a good backdrop for where we've been and where we're coming. When I started at RIAA, there were 6 major record company groups globally. And very quickly after peer-to-peer appeared, there were 3. So the number of major record company groups globally got cut in half. When I started, there were $14 billion in revenue in the recorded music industry. And very quickly over the next decade, that went down to $7 billion. So adjusted for inflation, it got cut in more than half. To put that into perspective, today, $14 billion in 1999 would be worth almost $22 billion. So the good news is in that evolution, and Garrett will talk about this, you know, we have sort of started climbing back up, and we're now starting to reap the benefits of all of that investment and working towards a healthy ecosystem. So we're now up to about 11 or $12 billion. So we're climbing up and things are finally proceeding, but we have a long way to go just to get to the point in real dollars where we were in 1999. And the story from 1999 until today is a story of adapting and evolving. And we're here to talk about what record companies do. And I would say, and I'll put up a little diagram that actually comes from Larry Miller's, one of Larry Miller's studies. But when you look at what a record company does, it's not that they haven't always focused on promotion and tour support and film and branding, publicity, marketing, production, data, creative catalog, etc. But the way that they are now doing it has changed a lot. The goals of working with artists to make sure that they can reach the fan base that they want to reach, create the works that they want to create, and succeed in the way that they want to succeed, those goals haven't changed. But the way that that happens has changed a lot. And Larry's going to talk about sort of the macro ways in which those changes have occurred and what a modern record label does today. And he did an amazing number of interviews in the study that he did, some with executives who have been around a long time, some with executives who are new, who have talked about through their experience how they have had to change in successfully promoting an artist, marketing an artist, finding an artist, how data is now used. And he'll talk about that. And Mark, you know, who's at one of the major record companies, is going to be able to talk sort of at the on the ground level of exactly what they are doing in their company and some examples of how that works. So I thought I would do to sort of set the stage for that is talk about some of the inflection points along the way during this evolution. And then Garrett will be able to sort of take us from streaming forward, which is one of those giant inflection points, and maybe help us discover where we're going in these partnerships. So I would say that there were a few major inflection points along the journey that I got to experience personally from RIAA's standpoint, but that the music industry, you know, really worked on investment and in adapting to make sure that they could start to evolve into what they've become today. The first of those was winning the Supreme Court case in Grokster. If you remember, there were all the stirs. There was Napster and Aimster and Grokster and all of the peer-to-peer and torrent sites that really rocked this industry. This had been an industry that had been focused on physical product for a long time. That doesn't mean that it hadn't adapted. I don't know of many industries that actually adapted as much as the recording industry had over time, you know, starting from wax cylinders and going to vinyl and then going to cassettes, going to CDs, maybe throwing an 8-track along the way. It had been used to mastering different platforms to share music with people, but always sort of in partnership with consumer electronics companies. They had even merged at some point, if everybody remembers EMI Thorn and others. And so when peer-to-peer came, and all of a sudden there was a decentralization in distribution, and the record companies themselves were not the distributors of the works, they really had to completely change their business model and to rethink how they were going to partner with artists in order to help them succeed in a world where people, weren't sure whether or not people getting what artists create for free was legal or not. There was a real question in the beginning in this type of system, whether or not it would be, there was an underlying legal foundation for protecting artists' work in this new environment. And winning the Grokster Supreme Court case was incredibly important, not just to clarify, but to educate people, to get them to accept the fact that you still have to pay for what artists create. The second big inflection point was in 2005 when Apple came out with the iPod, and Steve Jobs decided that a download industry would come and set the price for that at 99 cents. There's a lot of debate, and I think in hindsight, it wasn't, it might have been good for clarity, but not very good for the marketplace that there was such a static price. But it was the first time that there was a beta set up with a secure interface that was vertically integrated that allowed downloads instead of peer-to-peer to start winning back some people through convenience and experience. Another inflection point was 4G. Everybody receives a lot of blame for not adapting quickly enough. Usually that falls on creators, but the truth is technology was really not up to the point to allow a portable consumer experience on a smartphone of a service like a Spotify or an Apple Music. We really had to wait until 4G technology was able to create a streaming distribution system rather than just a download distribution system. And then finally, when the record companies worked out those unique licensing agreements with streaming services to bring them to the United States, because those streaming services, there's no way that they could just come in and license every single piece of catalog by, sort of paying for them up front. So unique licenses had to be brought out with a belief that they could ultimately succeed and that advertising could be an entry point for eventual subscriptions. And I'm sure that Garrett can talk a little bit about that. And so one of the things that record companies do for artists that's very important that our IAA is directly involved in is they protect them. They protect them in the digital environment. And if you look at how we've had to adapt just in the protecting of music, we started out in peer-to-peer and had to figure out how in the world to protect artists there. Then we moved down to cyber lockers. Then we moved down to stream ripping, and then we moved down to pre-release sites. Every one of those requires a rewiring of technology, developing new bots that go out and search for infringements based on data that comes in from record companies. A notice and takedown system that unfortunately is broken, that costs millions of dollars on all sides to sort of enforce, but that has to be done in order to try to get these works down. And now dealing with social media and social media links. So there's been an evolution in every single component, both from the enforcement side, the marketing side, the promotion side, of what record labels do and how they do it. And it's amazing to me that, over the last 20 years, the record companies have been able, like they did from wax cylinders to CDs, adapt as quickly as they have. It's not like they didn't fight it in the beginning. Of course they did. Everybody's going to fight changing, the way that they do things and how they do them. But eventually it necessitated innovation. And I think that record companies deserve a lot of credit for the innovation that they engaged in as part of the core role that they play in partnership with artists. So maybe I'll just leave it there for a minute so that you can get a real sense of how they've adapted and evolved at the macro and micro levels with Larry and Mark. And then Garrett can sort of inform us about the streaming revolution, which I think is a really good platform for questions.
Thank you, Mitch. That's a great start. You know, I often tell my students that the law chases technology. You know, as you see how copyright law is developed after new technologies come into play. But I'm going to add something new now. Entertainment and media both chases and leads technology, as you've indicated there with the 4G, for example, needing to be in place for some of the distribution channels to work in our new paradigm. So thank you so much for that. Now we'll hear from Mark Baker.
Are we on? Great. And I think I had some slides as well. I think the organizers can put those up. There we go. Okay, great. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to join you today. I want to provide a little bit of perspective from Warner Music Group to add a little bit of color and context to what we're talking about today. As an introduction, Warner Music Group is one of the world's leading recorded music companies, and for transparency, we're also a member of RIAA. Between our recorded music labels, which include Atlantic and Warner Records, plus around 17 additional imprints, and our music publishing business, Warner Chappell Music, we're involved in all aspects of the creation of music, from the initial concept of a song all the way through to the final production and distribution of that song. If we could change the slide, please. So one of the questions that we're exploring today is whether artists really need a label. And I think the answer to that is both yes and no, depending on what they want to do. Artists have more options than ever before to get their music out. They can use platforms like YouTube for exposure, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not a career, and it doesn't allow the artist to support themselves through their music, like Rosanne Cash mentioned in her remarks earlier today. Exposure is great, but that's not a career. I can think of no global artist who has built a career only through their online presence. It takes a diverse set of capabilities to support an artist's professional career. No one has the skill set to do everything themselves, and trying to do everything independently really distracts the artist from writing, performing, or recording, which is what the artist does best. Ultimately, artists either sign with a label or they have to build their own teams piecemeal. Labels have the advantage of bringing in-house expertise to hit the ground running. The primary function of a label is really essentially to amplify the talent of the artist, to allow them to reach a wider audience and get their music to more outlets and let them build their career. Mitch talked a little bit about that decline in the music industry, and from, you recall, from 1999 to about 2015, the recorded music industry lost about 40% in annual revenues, or 50% if it's adjusted for inflation, as Mitch had presented. You know, that was really driven by counterfeit and online file sharing. And faced with that tremendous financial pressure, plus the change in the basic business model from physical goods to the streaming model, labels have really had to think critically about how we add value for artists, for fans, and for our licensees. And also, as mentioned by Mitch, some of the basic functions really haven't changed, although how we do those things has changed dramatically. First, labels are still the primary investors in music and bear the financial risk. And at Warner Music Group, we reinvest 35% of our gross revenues in our artists through our A&R spend. We also identify a new talent, and how we do that has changed, but A&R remains a core function of our business. The artist's voice is their own, but our A&R team can work closely with them to help them develop their sound and image, connect them with the right songs that fit their voice and style, and connect with what fans are really craving today. For example, our A&R team worked with Lizzo for 2 years after signing her before she was really able to break through. Also the art of record making has not fundamentally changed. The technology's improved, The cost has come down significantly, but a track recorded at home simply cannot compare to a track recorded in a professional studio with an experienced sound engineer and mixer. So modern labels really amplify artists' talent and reach. But then, the music market is much bigger than just streaming. Our marketing teams help artists cut through the clutter and reach their audience, and are constantly seeking new innovative ways to license our catalog. And negotiating those deals is a full-time job. Our business affairs teams negotiate licensing deals, and by bringing scale, we're in a better position to negotiate than would be a single artist. Major labels also offer artists global reach. Warner Music Group has a presence in more than 70 countries. So while we can help introduce major artists like Lizzo or Dua Lipa to global audiences, we also help artists like Anita in Brazil, or Tones and I from Australia, or Tina Ray from China reach global audiences that would be difficult for them to reach independently. At the end of the day, artists have choices in terms of whether they want to sign with a label, and if so, with which label they want to sign. There's a lot of competition among the labels for talent. And ultimately, artists sign with labels where they feel that there's a good fit and where they're supported artistically and professionally. That intangible human connection isn't something that comes from an online platform alone. So can we switch to the next slide? There we go. So that's a little bit about kind of the services that Warner Music Group can provide. But one of the things that really has changed and evolved over the years is we now really take very much an a la carte approach. So for artists who don't want the full service option, they can pick and choose the level and types of support that they need to start, boost, or manage their careers. For example, Level is sort of our entry-level direct digital distribution platform for DIY and developing artists and content owners that offers freedom and flexibility. For a small fee, Level can manage the delivery of new music to the major DSPs, set up their artist profile, and provide other services to distribute and promote their work. There's no obligations or product commitment, and the artist retains 100% ownership of their rights. Moving up the scale, ADA, or Alternative Distribution Alliance, is our independent distribution platform, which leverages our global infrastructure on behalf of independent labels and independent artists. Our partners retain ownership of the rights and control over their creative journey while tapping into our human and technology resources. ADA offers each of our partners a bespoke, personally curated deal, giving them everything they need and nothing that they don't want, from the administration of rights, digital marketing tools, marketing and promotion, fan engagement and analytics, merch support, sync licensing, and more. And finally, I'll just talk a little bit about our artist services team. An artist's job is to create music, not design and produce t-shirts. Artist services can provide a whole range of support for artists. For example, we can help with the design, production, distribution of t-shirts, baseball caps, mugs, all this sort of tour merch, which is a growing source of revenue for artists. We can help organize VIP experiences for fans that require significant logistical support and planning, particularly during multi-stop tours. We help artists develop and manage their online presence, including their online stores. We also provide customer support services to help resolve problems when they arise, which is an area that a lot of people forget, but can be very time consuming if an artist is trying to manage all of that on their own. We provide real-time analysis and data and metrics on what's selling, the demographics of their fans, all of this sort of stuff which helps kind of inform the artist. And finally, last thing I'll mention is that we can also help support with licensing and the creation of new artist-related products. Like here we have Wiz Khalifa's Weed Farm app, which jumped to the top spot on the games chart within the first 24 hours after release and has been installed more than 10 million times. So artists need a team to support them if they want to have a career. Without the label, the artist will have to stitch together all of these sorts of services that a label provides. Last year, more than 95% of the top 200 streamed tracks in the United States were released by majors, which suggests that we continue to add value. Major labels like Warner Music Group can offer a full range of customizable services, from simply getting the tracks onto the platforms to full service deals. Artists today have more choices than ever, and labels provide high value for money. So let me pause there because I'm out of time. I've gone 30 seconds over and hand it over
Thank you, Mark. That was great. We have, I think that's a great indication of how record companies have adjusted in the last decade and a half. When 360 deals first came into the arena, there was sort of a one-size-fits-all approach that a lot of labels were taking. And now you're seeing, at least with the strong labels, making an effort to actually carve out things and make sure that they're adding value to those areas where that 360 takes place. So thank you so much for that. We'll hear now from Garrett Levin. Garrett?
Thank you, Loren. Let me just get my slides set up here. I hope that everyone can see that. So first of all, thank you to CPIP, to Sean and the team at CPIP for organizing this event. I'm very excited to be a part of this panel and this discussion. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Garrett Levin. I am the president and CEO of DMA, the Digital Media Association, excuse me. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of two bigger picture foundational truths that guide me in my job and inform the approach that the companies that I represent up here on the screen take to collaborating in this ecosystem. And I think it's great that really both Loren and Mitch emphasize the interconnected nature of all of this. First, the first truth is that streaming is responsible for a resurgent, growing, and revitalized music business economically. And second, that business is more interconnected than ever before. And we all only truly prosper when we work together and toward a common goal. So let's talk about that first part first. Sorry, I jumped ahead. It wasn't that long ago, Mitch talked about it. Mitch talked about it in kind of tracking his own career at the RIAA, where the business was facing an existential crisis. There were double-digit revenue losses year over year. The business had been cut literally in half. There were questions about its relevance in a digital era. There were questions about whether entire generations of fans would literally ever pay for music again. It was a pretty bleak time for the industry. I think what's critical is that that is not the place we find ourselves in now. At the end of 2019, there were nearly 100 million paying music subscribers just in the United States. That represents kind of a shocking to me, but nice shocking, more than a third of the internet population of this country. And then there are more than 270 million users of ad-supported streaming services. There were over 1 trillion streams of music in 2019. And streaming, as a result, has resuscitated the music business. And this is data that I borrowed from my friends at the RIAA. It is the primary reason for the year over year over year over year growth in the business as we look at other formats and the declines over that same period of time. Streaming reaches nearly every American now. An army of fans essentially vote each day with their phones and their listens. The exponential growth of the business speaks to millions of fans deeply satisfied with that experience. So how did this happen? How did we go from the point that kind of the deep depths that we hit that Mitch talked about to where we are now? What works about it? First and foremost, I think it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it, it takes great music that fans want to hear, want to fall in love with, dance to, cry to, sing out loud at the top of their lungs. It's also taken work by labels, publishers, artists, songwriters, and services to develop a licensing system that allows for efficient and effective rights clearances and payments to rights holders in a framework that sometimes dates back more than a century. And it's taken billions of dollars of R&D investments by the streaming services to build these consumer-friendly platforms that lured those users away from unlicensed platforms and created previously unimaginable tools for creators that have changed how music is released and discovered. Those investments are what today keep fans engaged day after day, even in a world with literally endless entertainment alternatives. That last aspect is often overlooked. That the streaming companies are not simply a 2020 version of Tower Records or FM radio. Here's my shameless plug. We recently released our Streaming Forward report, which is part of the materials that participants have access to for the conference. And one of the things that the report gets into is what we've identified as kind of the superpowers of streaming. And I wanted to just talk about them briefly. The first is that direct artist and fan relationship. Streaming services are the connective tissue within today's music industry. They seamlessly link fans with the music they love at the push of a button. This is built on the direct relationships that the services have established with fans on one side of that equation and artists on the other side. These relationships allow the services to directly connect artists and fans in ways that would have seemed impossible even a decade ago, which drive the modern music economy, and which we're seeing in today's upheaval brought on by the pandemic are being used to experiment and find fascinating new ways to engage between fans and artists alike. The second superpower is the data that's available to streaming services. It's not only vast in quantity, but it's vastly superior to the previous approximations of use for services such as traditional radio. Unlike distribution channels of the past, there's no guesswork as to what streaming audiences are listening to. That data is a known quantity. Streaming services know their audiences, what they like, and what to recommend to them to keep them engaged. Recording artists, songwriters, record labels, publishers immensely benefit from that data as well. Programming and curation, the playlists, editorial placements, personalized menus have become highly valuable real estate on streaming services. These menus are where fans go every day, often several times a day, to discover new music and artists. Discovery. Online music services hold more than 60 million songs, some of them, allowing fans to listen to nearly whatever music they want, whenever and wherever they want it, whether they knew it before they found it on that platform or not. And access. Music services can be reached via desktop computer, mobile phone, smart speakers, and in the car. As Mitch mentioned, this has been made possible by technological developments such as 4G wireless connectivity. The continuity of listening experiences will become more important with artificial intelligence-driven capabilities able to serve music specific to context, location, and mood. Could Tower Records do all of that? Can FM radio? International artists like BTS, J Balvin, or Ozuna enjoy massive fan bases. Independent acts like Glass Animals, Tones, and I, who we now get a second shout out in the in our panel. We did not plan that. Arizona Zervas and countless others have climbed the charts and attracted new fans thanks to streaming. It enables a stronger, deeper relationship between the artist and the fan, expands the scale and scope of artist ambition, introduces artists to new audiences they never would have been exposed to in the analog world. All of this innovation has reshaped and revitalized the music industry and created a pathway to record high revenues within the next half decade. So my second essential truth, the experience of the Music Modernization Act affirmed for me that progress that is both meaningful and enduring only occurs when the final product is the result of collaboration, of a respectful give and take, of a shared perspective that our fates are interwoven, and that zero-sum gamesmanship is counterproductive. We only truly win when each stakeholder approaches the exercise with a win-win calculus. Here's the thing, today's nimble, dynamic, consumer-driven marketplace demands that kind of approach. We can't be stuck in old ways. We have to listen to fans more closely than ever before. We have to constantly pivot, adapt, innovate, embrace change. Look, all of us industry participants will, of course, continue to advocate in our self-interest. To expect otherwise would be naive. But we must never lose sight of the fact that the collective fate rises and falls based on our capacity to listen to each other and constantly work toward a common goal. Many fans don't distinguish between a producer and a PRO. I've had conversations with my own family members explaining the complexities of music licensing. But all the speaking at this conference do, of course, we recognize the vital individual contributions of all the valued participants in the music ecosystem. But fans simply do not. They want choice. They want access to music available on any device at any time, anywhere, and at a reasonable price. That means streaming has created a new paradigm. It's the current day version of FM radio and MTV. Your vinyl collection, for those of you who have a vinyl collection, your MP3 library, the jukebox at your favorite bar, the best friend who refers a song or album based on your personal preferences or her refined taste, the liner notes you read in a CD case, and the artist fan club gives you first access to special perks. It's all of those things wrapped in one experience. And why? Because that's what the fan of 2020 demands, and technology has made it possible. That means we must constantly work to simplify and make more nimble a business with complicated sets of rights, multiple participants, and stubborn silos. We have to live in today and compete for every single moment for that fan. We can't pretend that the economics of our business somehow are immune from the realities of digital entertainment today, where we are all competing for attention in this economy. The only way we continue to succeed is to work to break down those traditional silos, keep our eye firmly on that North Star of collective success. And we have to do so with humility, recognizing that success is not guaranteed and that unforeseen events like those we are living through today can wreak havoc throughout the ecosystem. The streaming services work with regards to COVID-19 is a good recent illustration of this. The streaming companies enthusiastically support the Save Our Stages effort and needed relief for independent venues. We recognize it's an interconnected music system we're in. Artists partly build their fan bases through hustle and hard work, playing in front of smaller crowds, trying to get to iconic clubs like the Troubadour in Hollywood or the Bowery Ballroom or Austin Stubbs or my favorite, the 930 Club here in DC, and thousands of other venues of all sizes around the country. Live music and streaming synergistically complement each other. I cannot wait to see live music again. The Music Modernization Act is not only a virtuous reform of our music licensing laws, it should be a guiding philosophy for how we organize, how we interact with each other as an industry, and how we gauge the value of what we advocate for. Thanks for listening. I can't wait to take some questions and with the time we have remaining after Larry goes. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Garrett. You made me miss my time in DC. Some great music up there as well. So we were talking about the ecosystem and how we all are interrelated and how we have to pull together to make success for the entire industry. And one arm of that ecosystem is the educational arm. And we're going to have Professor Larry Miller now talk to us from that angle. Larry? Larry, you're muted. And while Larry is getting set up there, I also want to remind you to send us any questions you have in the chat function. We've been receiving some so far, and we'll certainly try to get to them after Larry's presentation. All right, you're up, Larry.
We need to do things in sequence around here. And so we need to unshare and then unmute. And then hopefully we can reshare. Okay. And there we go, and there we go. So, so once again, thank you everybody for the invitation. I'm glad to be here at the conference. Just a little bit about me. Yes, I do run the music business programs at NYU, and I maintain an advisory business. My personal background is music. I owned and operated a record label and music publisher. It was independent with distribution through Sony, and we got lucky, had a bunch of hits, and I was able to sell it to Sony about a dozen years ago. Finance, which is my training and background, and technology. I ran a couple of Internet One digital music startups, including a spin out from AT&T Labs Research that is the compression technology and security technology that formed the foundation for originally iTunes and now Apple Music, and more recently public policy. Last year, we published this, Same Heart, New Beat. It was a large-scale qualitative study on how the recorded music industry fundamentally restructured itself to deliver value to artists and fans in the streaming economy. It was supported by the RIAA and the three majors, and you can download it at musonomics.com. We are updating this work now, and the revised, or let's call it Volume 2 document, will be out early next year. What made this project special or unique? It was the first time that anybody had done a large-scale qualitative study with access to proprietary financial data from the three majors, Universal, Sony, and Warner Music Group, and the RIAA. In doing this project, we conducted in-depth interviews, often multiple in-depth interviews with 50 top executives in the US recorded music business, and that included a number of independent labels as well. And so when we say nothing is different, everything is different, what we mean is that labels still today do the four fundamental things that they have always done. They still find brilliant artists. They connect the brilliant artists with great collaborators to make the music be as good as it can be. They connect the music in many ways with the potential for good commercial outcomes. And then when those good commercial outcomes happen, share the economics. So the what of what labels do hasn't really changed so much, but the how has changed permanently and fundamentally. We documented that transformation in this paper, and we'll talk about it a little bit more today, but first a little bit more context. The growth of streaming has led to a situation where the tide has been rising now for a number of consecutive years, as Mitch and Garrett and Mark had mentioned, was after a period of 15 years of really wandering in the desert in the first 14 or 15 years of this century. That is no longer the case. The tide has been rising for everybody, and growth in music consumption has boosted signings by the three majors by 12% over just the last several years. And so streaming has had a super important impact on this business and on the lives and careers of many, many, many artists here in the United States and around the world. For many musicians, the democratization of music production and distribution carried the promise of reaching multitudes of eager fans at the touch of an upload button. Yet the virtually infinite selection of music that's available on most streaming platforms has actually made it more difficult than ever for an individual artist to break through, especially on the global stage. Today, signing with a label, as Mark mentioned, is a choice, not a requirement to get basic distribution. So although it's certainly possible for any one of us, including a room full of lawyers and prospective lawyers, to smash out a piece of music on their laptop or phone and push it out through any of the basic distribution services that exist, to the point where that track is theoretically available for discovery on many of the major streaming platforms around the world by this time tomorrow. The fact is, there's a big difference between theoretical discoverability and having a sustainable career, or even being able to realize your ambition if you are an artist who has the desire and ability to become the most popular artist in the world. It's hard to do that all by yourself. Music has become a consumption business, and today's music fans discover and consume music through multiple channels and platforms, many of which, such as social media and fan clubs, are now routinely maintained by the record label and with considerable expertise. Many fans now listen to music via the premium subscription services that are driving the vast majority of the revenue growth in this industry, or in the feels-free environment of ad-supported delivery. Fans can also access music by watching label-created and funded visual content on a myriad of screens, large and small, including YouTube and TikTok and everything else, while at the same time they may still buy vinyl records and CDs and continue to listen on the radio. So to properly synthesize and optimize all of these inputs and extract actionable insights requires hands-on experience, the kind of experience that is both broad and deep. Relationships, investment, instant access to a global marketing and distribution network that requires boots on the ground. Music has indeed become a consumption business rather than the kind of business that monetized 100% of consumption in week one, where we hoped that you went to the store to buy the album. The kind of consumption business where there is no peak, but only a hill with plateaus extending out further and further. So today's record companies are set up to maximize consumer engagement and amplify an artist's vision over longer and longer periods of time with all manner of artist-created music and video on behalf of the artists. We are swimming in, I hope swimming and not drowning these days, in an ocean of data about music discovery and consumption, and the tide continues to rise. And just, on this topic of data, yes, I run this academic program in music business at NYU. One of the new things that we started doing about 5 years ago, which we found provided our own students with just an unassailable competitive advantage in terms of their own ability to compete for the best internships and jobs, was to train them not so much in music, we do that, or in the structure and operations of the music industry writ large and small. We do that too. But to teach them numeric literacy, to teach them to be experts in using all of the tools and frameworks and processes of data science that are applied to being able to pull insights out of, as I said, just an ocean of data about music discovery and consumption. And so a label's competitive edge comes from being able to balance taste and gut instinct and market feel with data, and to be able to immediately aggregate and digest and interpret and react to information that's coming from multiple sources in staggering volumes in real time. Not so long ago, data analysis was delegated to just a handful of people who were counting radio spins and sound scans at physical retail locations. Today, of course, data is integral to the operations of every department in the record company. And with well over 40,000 tracks being uploaded every day, and with millions of artists' work being available on the streaming platforms, we're in a situation today where the top 10% of artists are driving 99% of the streams and naturally economics. And so with the shift towards streaming, labels now have much more data than simply looking at shipments and sales and downloads to analyze in order to pull out insights and see where the patterns are. The other thing that I want to underscore that I think is often left out of talks like this is that the people who work at labels love music. They are passionate champions for the people who create it. Their eyes light up when they talk about their favorite track from a new artist that they just discovered. And so while on the one hand, data is important and the ability to interpret it has become an important source of competitive advantage, data helps mitigate risk, but it's just no substitute for the goosebumps that we feel when we bump into a genius. Also, independent and DIY artists who are empowered to self-distribute in many cases are the fastest growing segment of recorded music and are truly a force to be reckoned with. Last year, artists without labels generated almost $750 million, up dramatically from only 2017. And I know that this data has been updated in the Dmca report that Garrett provided for you. Developing and career artists are aware, in other words, of the options that they have. And so labels have to work harder to convince artists how they'll add value and, you know, pay more, especially if they have a data trail. That is, if the artists have a data trail in order to induce those artists to sign with them, especially if it's a competitive bidding situation. One size, as Mark mentioned, no longer fits all, if it ever did. Artists have different ambitions. Not everybody wants to or needs to become the biggest artist in the world. But the efficiency of having all those services in one place still resonates with the vast majority of artists. And that is what a label does in 2020. So, what a label does has not changed fundamentally, but the operational impact on how labels deliver value to artists and fans has changed dramatically and permanently. And I'm happy to hear from any of you individually at that email address. And Loren, back over to you.
Thank you, Larry. That was awesome. This interesting discussion about data really brings my mind back to my college days back in the 80s. And I did an internship at WKYS in Washington, D.C. And one of my roles there was to call the record stores every Friday and get a list of their top 20 selling records. That's what data was.
Yeah. I think radio stations still have interns, but I don't think they're calling record stores so much anymore.
Right. Thank you so much. We're going to have Robert Lavine from Billboard Magazine is with us, and he's going to ask our first question of the panelists, and then we'll get to a few as time permits from those that are in the chat. Robert, could you raise your hand in the function there so we can get you in the system?
You see me?
There we go. There we go. All right.
Well, I just want to say this is the I don't think I've ever seen so many people in baseball hats getting CLE credits. It's a great you know, sort of surprising. It's a different kind of conference, but I like it. I work for Billboard. This is a business I love and I cover, and as you can probably see in the background, I'm one of those people who likes vinyl as well as streaming. I wanted to ask you, you know, you're all talking about this sort of, you know, subscription streaming business, where, you know, either subscription paid or sort of some form of advertising that's in a funnel to paid. But, you know, we're now seeing, you know, what I call, and I just made this up, the second order streaming businesses, TikTok, Twitch, services like that aren't licensed. I think they're operating under the DMCA in most cases. Is that a threat? Is that cannibalization? Is it something that Spotify and Apple have to watch out for? Is it something that helps them? And same with the industry. You know, a lot of artists are breaking on these platforms, but, you know, as you know, they provide exposure, but as the old Catskills joke goes, you could die of exposure.
I can take the first crack at that. Hey, Rob. So the answer is it depends on whether or not as these emerging platforms move forward, they fill a niche that is different to reach fans in a different way. And they work out unique licensing agreements that allow them to innovate instead of just getting stuck in a 90s ad model where they're shifting liability to the user. I think that, you know, for a while, everybody was stuck in a rut, which I call the DMCA rut, which, you know, unfortunately, when you sort of have a late 1990s law governing a music business that's evolving very quickly, sometimes you end up in a place where you just stick within the four corners of some benefit the law gives you, and that stops innovation. And, you know, it really took a lot of Garrett's members to break that cycle, to go in, offer something that fans wanted, to get unique licensing agreements, to create partnerships that then allowed subscription services where less people paying more money are driving the industry rather than more people paying nothing. And you get something like COVID and the advertising business crashes, and thank God that there was innovation where subscription services came in as the driver of the business. Not that there's not a place for ad-supported services, there are, and hopefully it's an entry-level point that helps to push and figure out innovative ways to push that subscription-driven business. You know, if you're not YouTube, then getting enough people to advertise at a micro level to have a sustainable business is very, very difficult without the other apparatuses that YouTube has around it as part of Alphabet and the Google universe. So I think that if you're Twitch and you're an emerging platform, which is now owned by Amazon, which obviously has a lot of licenses, you know, you have a couple of choices. You can work as partners in the ecosystem, get licenses, fill a niche, and drive the business forward in a way that, you know, will be helpful to everybody. Or you can get stuck in DMCA land, pass liability onto your users, which is not fun for them, and just collect up, and you're going to reach a plateau. This happened to Pandora. They had a United States only business for a long time because they had that, you know, statutory license that basically only worked in the US, and they didn't want to innovate and have on-demand services or other aspects that fans might have really wanted earlier, because their financial model was built around a 1990s legal construct. And that's what we have to get away from, is sort of services working with labels and artists to get licenses that move forward. So if you're a social media platform like TikTok or Dubsmash, or if you're a live stream entrant like Twitch that used to do gaming and now you're getting more into music, that's going to be the key. Good licenses that are versatile.
Yeah, I think to go to something that Loren picked up from Mitch's initial comments about kind of media and entertainment driving technology and vice versa. I mean, I think one thing that we see, and we can see it through kind of some of the evolutions, even in real time, that we're experiencing during the pandemic, is that none of us can predict where technology kind of takes us. If any of us on this panel could, we would probably have different jobs and wear even very expensive hats. But we can't, right? We can't predict those things. And I think that one of the things that the streaming economy has demonstrated, and I think this is to pull on a thread that Mitch was just talking about, has shown that when the parties sit down and think, okay, how do we try to set this up for success? How do we try to set this up to bring more money into the system, that we can actually succeed together on that? And so none of the specific companies that you mentioned are DMCA members, but this is a more general point about the fact that the speed at which the industry is evolving it doesn't compare to anything we've ever seen before. And if you know, there are a lot of great things that streaming has done, but one thing that I think is very clear and that's relevant to these kinds of conversations going forward is it's proven that we can build models that bring revenue into the system, that get fans to pay, and that get money to rights holders and ultimately to creators.
I would maybe add a couple comments to that as well. I mean, I think there's an important distinction that perhaps, you know, wasn't underscored sufficiently earlier, which is the distinction between ad-supported platforms and paid streaming. We've talked about streaming a lot today. And I think certainly the paid subscription streaming has led to a lot of that growth in terms of annual revenues of the industry. It's a very different model than, say, the ad-supported subscription, which allows, again, a lot of exposure, but not necessarily a career for artists who aren't really remunerated in the same way. But there's also a question about Section 512 and the safe harbors. And I think certainly, that is a concern. I would only, note that the U.S. Copyright Office came out with this report about 2 months ago or so, saying that the safe harbors have tilted the balance significantly away from content creators. The European Union passed a new EU copyright directive in 2019 was signed into law. But they took a great approach in terms of making this distinction between active and passive platforms, because when the safe harbors were first conceived, these platforms really were the dumb pipes, and it really kind of described what they were. That doesn't describe what they are today, where many of these platforms are cataloging content, they're interacting with it, they're making playlists, and most importantly, they're monetizing it. And so I think that could be a potential way forward, but I think certainly there is a lot of discussion about Section 512 reform, and I think from a labels perspective, that certainly is needed. I'm conscious of time, so let me stop there.
Thank you, everyone. And speaking of time, I know that we've gone over, so I'm wondering if Sean O'Connor, I don't know if you want to jump in here and wrap this up, or if we should continue discussing. But
I think we do need to. People are on a schedule.
Yes.
And so we should move it along. But yeah, I just really appreciate everyone turning out for this panel. I really did like the baseball cap thing, but I just have to ask, was that a plan among you guys?
They didn't tell me. I would have worn my Yankee.
I know, Lauren. I was like, you didn't get the memo.
Well, if you were in the green room, there might have been a little bit of coordination.
There you
go. Okay, good.
It was not planned very long in advance.
Okay, so it was very, very close term planning. All right, well, look, I want to thank Loren and all the panelists, and also Mitch, since you're still here too. Again, thanks to RIAA for being a primary sponsor of this conference. Again, as I mentioned the other day, we can't, even though this is all online, there's still a lot of costs going on for doing these kinds of events. So we really appreciate you still supporting us through this. To all the participants, thanks for staying with us. Again, I hope you're enjoying this format where we're keeping it relatively short each day rather than 8 hours of programming on one day to cut down on the Zoom fatigue. We will be back tomorrow morning at 10:45. We'll have Power of Data Ownership and Analytics. We're going to get even more into data that Larry and others were talking about so well today. And then we'll have a session on artist management and the business of music, and then wrapping it up tomorrow with supporting artists and communities. So thanks again for attending. Thanks to all the panelists, and we'll see everyone Zoom 10:45 a.m. tomorrow.
Thank you all.
Bye all.
Bye.